resume our meeting with the next item and the last item this afternoon, which is the debate on the report titled Violent Pornography, a Test for Human Rights, presented by Ms. Laura CASTEL on behalf of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination. And we will then hear from Mr. Joseph O'Reilly, who will present an opinion on behalf of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. And I will now call Ms. CASTEL, and you have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end of the reply to the debate. You have the floor, Ms. CASTEL. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Is this one working? Yeah. Dear colleagues, in no other place or no other platforms are women more dehumanized or objectified than in violent pornography. That is why the objective of this report is not to debate on pornography, but to investigate the direct impact of extreme and degrading content on the dignity and safety of women and girls. We are witnessing that digital content is increasingly pervasive, aggressive, and violent. The spreading of contents depicting sexual violence to an indiscriminate community of users that includes minors is massive and must be prevented. There is an alarming rise in content depicting physical and psychological violence, sexual assault, and dangerous practices like strangulation, leading to severe neurological consequences. This violence is not gender neutral. 97% of violent scenes target women and girls, and their suffering is a source of sexual excitement. Extensive multidisciplinary research identifies the correlation between violent pornography and violations of women's rights and shows that violent pornography leads to decreased empathy towards the pain of others, adolescent vulnerability, and normalization of rape culture and distorted notion of consent, and teaches viewers that women enjoy being coerced, abused, or raped. Colleagues, freedom of expression is a fundamental right, however, it's not absolute, and clarifying whether violent pornography infringes such limits is crucial, especially when it affects minors. That's why we asked the Venice Commission to prepare a study on this matter, and it confirms that states can legally limit violent pornography to protect public health and the rights of others, and that freedom of expression narrows when it involves the humanization. Nevertheless, we should avoid subjective or moralistic criteria, and we should focus instead on objective harm and structural discrimination against women. Also, it stresses that a gender-sensitive and harm-based approach should be integrated into legislation and judicial practice, and emphasizes the importance of the protection of minors through risk assessment, mitigation measures, rapid removal, blocking procedures for harmful content, proportional obligations imposed to online platforms and internet providers, procedural safeguards, judicial review, and effective remedies regarding blocking or takedown orders. The Venice Commission concludes that international cooperation should be reinforced in order to align standards and facilitate cross-border evidence sharing and enforcement against the online dissemination of violent content. Colleagues, in the light of all the experts' considerations, we call on different measures: legal regulation, cooperation with online platforms, education, information and awareness-raising measures, crime prevention in the production of pornographic content, And finally, international cooperation on criminal matters. In this regard, we propose concrete measures, such as the prohibition of the production and dissemination of material depicting rape, coercion, or degradation, including non-consensual deepfakes, or the implementation of robust age verification systems and the removal of illegal content within 24 or even 48 hours, or the use of AI detection tools and hash databases to identify and block violent or non-consensual material. But at the same time, AI has great potential as a tool to detect such content and limit its spreading, because it can process vast amounts of data in real time and identify tone of post and patterns. Also, we call for comprehensive and mandatory sexuality education to help youth analyze critically and reject objectification. Support the victims of the pornography industry or image abuse, and offer immediate access to legal and psychological assistance. Regarding the recommendations to the Committee of Ministers, since violent pornography is transnational, we call them to lead international action and launch a worldwide campaign. As well, we call to organize an international conference on the effects and impacts of this violent content on health. In a nutshell, this resolution concludes that violent pornography is a relevant human rights issue, affecting Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which prohibits torture, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. It normalizes degradation, violence and sexual assault, and we, as legislators and policymakers, should address this, including the protection of minors from exposure and the harmful effects on individuals and society as a whole. I hope all these proposals have your support, as well as a fruitful discussion. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Ms. Castel, and I now call on Mr. O'Reilly for the opinion from the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. You have 3 minutes, Joseph.
Thank you, President. Can I begin by acknowledging Ms. Laura CASTEL's exhaustive and detailed work to produce a quality report which has the support of the Social Affairs Committee. I had very constructive exchanges with Ms. CASTEL throughout the process, and I also want to acknowledge the great work of my colleague from the Secretariat of the Social Affairs Committee, Ms. Janet DeVoe. Our committee proposed a number of amendments to achieve the best possible wordings. For our second amendment sought to insert the term child sexual abuse material, rendering it unambiguously illegal. Our third amendment emphasises the harmful effect of any form of pornography on children and the need to protect them from an exposure to it. Our fourth amendment emphasises the Lanzarote Convention principle that children cannot consent to pornography. Our fifth amendment calls on the Committee of Ministers to act on the Assembly's call to draft an age-appropriate, comprehensive sex education programme. Our sixth amendment seeks to reinforce the report's call on all members and observer states to put in place legislation to criminalise sexual abuse material. Our subsequent amendments require platforms to have up-to-date detection tools, insert the term women and children, need for public education campaigns, the promotion of the Day of Protection of Children on the 18th of November, this year. And age verification critically for performers, in inverted commas, to ensure that they are over 18. A research in this whole sphere has established that most children are exposed intentionally or unintentionally to pornographic material. Number two, that tragically pornography has become a key source of information and education about sexuality for many children. Number three, that boys are more likely to view it. Number four, that many adults view it frequently. The exposure of children to pornography is associated with many harms, such as violent and harmful sexual behaviour and an inability to form mutually respectful, good relationships. Its most extreme results involve rape and gratuitous violence. Again, I strongly support this major and comprehensive support, congratulate Ms Castells, and urge this plenary to enthusiastically endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to the speakers list, and I remind the Assembly that the speaking time is limited to 3 minutes for spokespersons for the political groups and 2 minutes for other members. And in the debate, I call first from the UEL, Ms. Alessandra Maiorino. You have the floor.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the UL Group, I'd like to thank the rapporteur for bringing before this Assembly an issue that has remained too long in a political blind spot. For years, we have discussed violence against women, gender stereotypes, and rape culture. Yet, we have often been reluctant to look at one of the largest global industries which is built upon the commodification of women's body and the eroticization of domination. Research cited by the rapporteur indicates that 90% of young people are exposed to pornography, some up to 5,000 hours before they reach the age of 20. Algorithms used by major platforms are designed to maximize engagement, and in doing so, they often recommend increasingly violent content. The issue here is not pornography as such. It is the normalization of violence. The report refers to a large body of research linking violent pornography to increased acceptance of violence against women, sexist attitudes, sexual coercion, and sexual assault. It cites a review of 500 bodies concluding that pornography contributes to gender-based violence. Grevio has repeatedly warned that the normalization of practices such as strangulation, degradation, and non-consensual acts undermines young people's understanding of healthy relationships and genuine consent. But I would like to raise another question that deserves greater political attention. Too often the debate focuses only on consumers, while ignoring the conditions under which violent pornography is produced. What does consent really mean when economic vulnerability is the condition for participation? Can we generally speak of free choice in an industry where visibility, income, and survival might depend on producing increasingly extreme, degrading, or violent content? These are not moral questions. These are questions about power, inequality, and exploitation. For the dual group, there are priorities. First of all, sexual education and digital literacy are indispensable. If algorithms are educating our children before schools and families do so, then democratic institutions have already lost ground. Second, online platforms must be finally held accountable. Third, our response must remain firmly rooted on women's rights, children's rights, and human dignity. Freedom of expression is a cornerstone of democracy, but it cannot exempt a multi-billion-euro industry from scrutiny when there is a growing evidence of its role in normalizing violence and inequality. The real question before us is not whether violent pornography influences society, it is why society continues to treat one of the most powerful cultural industries as though it had no influence at all. Thank you.
Thank you, and I now call from the Socialists, Democrats and Greens group, Ms. Luz Martínez-Seco. You have the floor.
Gracias, presidente. Señorías, comienzo en primer lugar por felicitar a Laura CASTEL por el esfuerzo en lograr un texto tan medido en un contexto tan complicado. Nos enfrentamos a un desafío que interpela directamente a los derechos humanos, a la igualdad y a la protección de nuestra juventud: la proliferación de la pornografía violenta en el entorno digital. No estamos hablando de un contenido neutro, sino de una realidad que banaliza la violencia, erosiona el principio de consentimiento y deshumaniza, especialmente a mujeres y a niñas. La evidencia es clara. Este tipo de contenidos representa agresiones, coerción y prácticas degradantes que acaban configurando un imaginario en el que la violencia se presenta como normal e incluso deseable. Y esto tiene consecuencias graves en la sociedad, pero especialmente en la gente joven. Los adolescentes son particularmente vulnerables. Su cerebro aún está en desarrollo y es más susceptible a la exposición repetida a estímulos intensos, lo que puede alterar la percepción de la sexualidad, dificultar la empatía y normalizar la agresión. Además, los estudios citados en el informe muestran que los jóvenes expuestos a pornografía violenta tienden a interiorizar mensajes profundamente dañinos, que la violencia forma parte del sexo, que el consentimiento no es imprescindible o que las mujeres pueden desear prácticas coercitivas. Y esto tiene un impacto directo en sus relaciones. En las chicas puede traducirse en una menor exigencia de respeto y en la aceptación de conductas violentas. En los chicos se asocia con un aumento de actitudes agresivas o coercitivas. En definitiva, estamos ante un factor que contribuye a perpetuar la violencia de género desde edades muy tempranas. Por eso nuestra respuesta no puede ser parcial. Este informe propone un enfoque integral. En primer lugar, como ya se ha dicho, un marco normativo claro que prohíba la pornografía violenta y garantice la retirada rápida de contenidos ilícitos o no consentidos. En segundo lugar, una mayor responsabilidad con las plataformas digitales, con sistemas de verificación de edad, transparencia y uso de tecnologías para impedir la difusión de estos contenidos. Pero hay un tercer pilar que es fundamental: la educación afectivo-sexual. No podemos dejar que Internet sea la principal fuente de aprendizaje de nuestros jóvenes en materia de sexualidad. La educación debe ser obligatoria, basada en la evidencia y centrada en el respeto, en la igualdad, en la autonomía corporal y el consentimiento. Debe dotar a los jóvenes de pensamiento crítico para identificar y rechazar mensajes que normalizan la violencia. Señorías, proteger a la juventud no es limitar derechos, es garantizarlos. La libertad de expresión no puede servir de escudo para contenidos que promuevan la violencia y vulneran la dignidad humana. Actuar es una obligación democrática, es construir la cultura de consentimiento, del respeto y de la igualdad real. Por eso debemos apoyar con determinación este enfoque que regula efectivamente, que responsabiliza a lo digital y con una educación afectivo-sexual robusta que prepare a nuestros jóvenes para relaciones libres de violencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, and I now call on Mr. Ronan Mullen from EPP.
Very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to congratulate Ms. Castel on this report. A lot of hard work has gone into it, and the EPP supports the report, as do I. Is it the perfect report? No. No report is perfect. It is better to see this report as, I think, a step on a journey to dealing with the cancer of pornography in our society. Because it is pornography in general that is the problem. It's better to think of violent and extreme pornography as a cause, as a result, not a cause. because what the research, of course, shows is that when people are exposed to pornography, particularly the young, they are gradually exposed to more and more extreme forms, and indeed find themselves in need of accessing more and more extreme forms of pornography. And that is why people such as Reem Absalom, the UN Special Rapporteur, are very clear that in the end there is a problem with pornography per se. That is not, however, to subtract from the very important goal that the rapporteur has identified, that by targeting violent and extreme pornography, we can deal with a very particular problem that is there, and it needs a response that includes ultimately a recourse to the civil and criminal law in a way that, of course, wouldn't attract support just now, regrettably, in relation to pornography in general. But sooner or later, we are going to have to grasp the nettle that freedom of expression does not extend to commodifying other people, especially not women and children, but indeed no other human being. And we have a wrong idea of freedom of expression when we see recourse to forms of pornography as somehow a legitimate expression of that. Pornography is not cost-free. It never is. There is no ethical porn. Pornography is on the rise, and it's a catastrophe. There is a link between it and with the violent behaviours that need to be further investigated. It also has a damaging impact on the mental health of youth, and I want to thank the rapporteur for accepting some of my amendments, touching, for example, on the harms that pornography does in terms of young people's mental health. Also the need to target payment networks, because that is a key part of targeting the pornography industry. It violates human dignity in every situation. We must never forget either that children's access to pornography per se is already a form of sexual abuse. And anything that ever colludes in children being able to access pornography is in itself a form of sexual abuse. We need to come to that point in our collective thinking if we're going to put people's rights and dignity front and centre. Finally, I would say the rights of parents are very important here. The only way you can build trust and get the kind of comprehensive education that the rapporteur calls for and that this report calls for is ultimately to respect the primary role of parents as educators. Nothing else will work. And they have moral values that are mostly in almost every situation sound. And I think sooner or later we will have to accept as well that parents are partners, not opponents, in the inculcation of the kind of values in young men and women that will lead to a gentle and more respectful society. But overall, I want to congratulate the rapporteur on all her hard work.
Thank you. And I now call on Mr. Pavel Jablonski from the ECPA Group.
Thank you, President. And I can only subscribe to what Mr. Mullen has said. Congratulations to the rapporteur. Very, very good work. And I, as a Conservative, I'm happy that there are some rare occasions when I can even support reports drafted by a member of the far left, which is a very good situation, because the main goal of what we are working on here is too important not to do so. We might have some differences. I will tell about it a little bit later. But it addresses indeed one of the most important challenges, how our children will perceive sexuality, how they will treat each other, their future wives and husbands. Will they be able to form functioning marriages and families? And indeed, for this reason, this is a question of our existence, of our survival. There are some things that I don't precisely like. For example, that it's written in the recommendation that it is women that the violent pornography is a threat to women. It is obviously true, but let us not lose out of sight that it's also a huge threat for men, especially for young boys, whose minds are being affected, are reshaped by these violent images, changing ways, how they perceive women, how they perceive their future wives, harming badly their ability to form functioning families. Some differences aside, I will still be supporting this as the goal is too important. And let us be precise about what it targets, because it's not about freedom of expression. It's not that we are targeting some forms of art, some political messages. It's directly violence. And there is no human right to gain profits from images of rape, of strangulation. There is no right as such. And even the Convention permits us to impose some limitation. The most important thing, and this was very, very accurately described in the report, is that what the porn industry is doing to our children is not just a mistake, that some children are mistakenly looking at these images. This is a plan. This is a way of making money. This industry is luring kids into watching these materials. They are falsely labeling it with the names of children cartoons so that they have future customers. And something must be done about this. I believe that this is a very good step, although this fight will be a very, very tough, very difficult. But let's face it, this is a culture war. This is a war that we should all be fighting in the interest of our children, in the interest of our survival, of our existence. If this is the war that we would refuse to fight, we would be defeated by these multinational corporations that are only counting the money, but they don't care about how our children will be affected. So let's vote for that altogether, aside our day-to-day political differences, because indeed the goal is too important. Thank you once again. Congratulations for the report.
Thank you. And I now call on Madame Benedetta Coma from ALDE.
Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, au nom du groupe ALDE, je tiens tout d'abord à remercier chaleureusement Madame Laura CASTEL pour la qualité de son rapport et le travail approfondi qu'elle a consacré à un sujet aussi bien sensible qu'essentiel. Ce rapport nous rappelle une réalité que nous ne pouvons plus ignorer. La pornographie violente n'est pas seulement une question de moralité ou de choix individuel. C'est une question de droits humains, d'égalité entre femmes et hommes, de protection des mineurs et du respect de la dignité humaine. Au cours des années, les contenus pornographiques sont devenus plus accessibles, plus répandus et dans de nombreux cas plus violents. La violence représentée dans ces contenus vise majoritairement les femmes et les filles. Elle banalise des comportements qui, dans la réalité, constituent des violences sexuelles ou des atteintes graves à l'intégrité des personnes. Elle véhicule l'idée dangereuse que la domination, l'humiliation ou la contrainte pourraient faire partie d'une sexualité normale, fragilisant ainsi la culture du consentement que nous nous efforçons de promouvoir. Le rapport attire également notre attention sur l'impact préoccupant de ces contenus sur les enfants et sur les adolescents. Aujourd'hui, Internet et les réseaux sociaux sont souvent la première source d'information sur la sexualité pour les jeunes. Or, la pornographie ne peut en aucun cas constituer un modèle éducatif. Elle déforme la perception des relations affectives, perturbe la compréhension du consentement et influence durablement les comportements. Les recherches citées dans le rapport mettent également en évidence des conséquences psychologiques et neurologiques importantes, notamment chez les plus jeunes, dont le cerveau est encore en développement. Face à ces défis, le groupe ALDE soutient pleinement les principales recommandations du rapport. Renforcer la protection des mineurs grâce à des systèmes efficaces de vérification de l'âge. Accélérer le retrait des contenus illégaux. Soutenir les victimes. Responsabiliser davantage les plateformes numériques et renforcer la coopération internationale. Notre réponse doit être coordonnée à l'échelle européenne et internationale. Mais surtout, nous partageons pleinement l'idée qu'une éducation complète à la sexualité, adaptée à l'âge des jeunes et fondée sur le respect, l'égalité et le consentement constitue l'un des outils les plus efficaces pour prévenir ces violences. Toute sexualité doit être fondée sur le consentement. La liberté d'expression est l'un des fondements de nos démocraties, mais aucune liberté ne peut servir de prétexte à la banalisation de la violence ou à la négation de la dignité humaine. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Thank you very much. And now we open the list for the members who wish to speak. And the first is Ms. Bankulöbü.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, first I would like to thank to the dear Laura for this timely and important report. And it was really nice to meet you here and being partners for the women's rights, for the fighters for the women's rights. I'm really pleased to meet you here. And dear colleagues, gender-based violence is a scourge that has many causes, and The main one being patriarchy and the imbalance of power between women and men in the economy, in society and within the family. Such violence continues to find new ways, of course, of perpetuating and spreading itself. One of these is violent pornography, where violence against women is not only normalized, but often presented as desirable and even glamorized. I would like to focus on one particular aspect of this report and resolution, which I consider especially important, which is prevention. More specifically, prevention through information and education. As many experts regularly point out, generation after generation of children in Europe have pornography as almost their main source of information about sex and sexuality. It is a source of misinformation. It is misleading and becoming increasingly so. So teenagers and even preteens are exposed to the wrong, dangerous, and distorted idea that violence is a standard part of any sexual encounter. Boys and girls feel almost expected to respectively perpetrate this kind of violence and accept it. They receive this harmful information and too often they have no place to talk about it. Age-appropriate, evidence-based, comprehensive sexuality education in schools is where this conversation should happen. So I think this awareness will empower them to reject such harmful notions and ensure their personal relationships are always defined by consent and mutual respect. So it's time to make comprehensive sexual education a reality for all school students, as already recommended on many occasions by the Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Kuka.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, freedom is a human right, including the right to a self-determined, respectful sexuality, one that builds, not destroys. Yet millions of children are being robbed of that freedom. A smartphone, one click, that's all it takes to enter a world of violent pornography, not only on porn sites, but only on social media, messaging apps, even video games. The fact is alarming. 90% of online pornography content contains violence against women. Half of all boys aged 12 to 13 visits porn sites every month. Nearly 1 in 2 young people say that imitate what they see. Pornography has become the sex education of entire generation. The consequences are real. Children develop a distorted view of sexuality. Consent becomes submission. Some develop addictions. Others carry trauma for life. Women are dehumanized. Sexual violence is normalized. Images shapes attitudes. Attitudes shapes action. We must act, and we can act. Resolution 1835 showed us the way. The legal frameworks exist. Age verification is technically possible. In Switzerland, distributing pornography to minors is already a criminal offense. What is missing is political will. That's why I introduced the motion Ban Porn for Kids in the Swiss Parliament with full success. Children deserve freedom, not addiction. Respect, not exploitations. A sexuality grounded in dignity, consent and mutual respect. Let's stop protecting the profits of $1 billion industry. Let's start protecting our children. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Risch.
Geschätzte Kolleginnen, ich möchte bitte in deutscher Sprache sprechen. Vielen Dank an die Berichterstatterin. Ich möchte einige Aspekte des Berichts herausheben. Es wird ein struktureller Dialog und eine Zusammenarbeit mit Online-Plattformen gefordert. Selbstredend ist Dialog wichtig, immer. Aber wenn es um Opferschutz, insbesondere von Mädchen und Frauen geht, ist Dialog ohne maximalen gesetzgeberischen Druck im Hintergrund wirkungslos. Ein Beispiel: Die Plattform OnlyFans wird von Kritikern zu Recht als Plattform für digitale Zuhälterei und Prostitution eingeordnet. Es werden Online-Kurse angeboten und Netzwerke gebildet, die Männer zu OnlyFans-Managern ausbildet. Ein Schwerpunkt liegt dabei auf der emotionalen Abhängigkeitmachung der Frauen mit Kursen, die zeigen, wie man eine Seele einsperrt und Frauen sexuell ausbeutet. Ein Drecksgeschäft, das bekämpft gehört, national, international, mit den schärfsten Waffen der Gesetzgeber. Die heute fast schon frei zugängliche Gewaltpornografie ist das Produkt sich über Jahre verschiebender Grenzen, gesellschaftlicher Abstumpfung und Gewöhnung. Wir kennen die Metapher des Froschs, der sich in einem langsam aufheizenden Umfeld befindet, sich gewöhnt und schließlich unbemerkt stirbt. Und hier stirbt gerade in Echtzeit liebevolle Sexualitätsentwicklung, Erotik und gesunde Sexualität. Junge Mädchen und Buben wissen nicht mehr, was Sexualität im Sinne der Humana Naturalis eigentlich ist. Die sexuellen Erwartungen werden heute von einer maximal aggressiven Pornoindustrie gemacht. Ein perverses Expectation Management, das offenbar bereits eine Rückwirkung in die Popkultur zu haben scheint. Der Song Würg mich, Choke me hat es jüngst aufs Podest des ESC geschafft. Schauen wir noch etwas genauer hin. Aus infektiologischer und präventionsmedizinischer Sicht erschließt sich nicht, weshalb die Darstellung von männlichen Geschlechtsteilen ohne Kondome beim Geschlechtsverkehr und die Sichtbarkeit von Körpersäften vor und hinter Bezahlschranken nicht schon lange verboten und indexiert ist. Hier fängt es an, wenn im Bericht von lebensbedrohlichen Handlungen gesprochen wird. Ich danke.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Ms. Novicia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. While freedom of expression is a fundamental human right recognized by democratic societies, it is not absolute. Exercising freedom of expression does not give right to hurt, humiliate, and exploit. Violent pornography is raising significant concerns about the impact of the societies, especially on children, adolescents, and it is a real form of violence. Recently, pornography has drastically evolved. It can be easily accessed by children and young people on their mobile phones. Extremely worrying is the phenomenon of using children's images for pornographic purposes, what is a drastic form of violence, and it is a crime. Violent pornography has a detrimental effect on women's and girls' self-esteem and dignity. It is necessary to stop violent pornography and prevent negative impact on children, adolescents, women, and girls. The Polish government has recently adopted the draft law on protection of children against pornographic content on the web. I am sure that Polish Parliament will vote in favor. Other measures include also comprehensive sexuality education at schools. We have to remember that children who do not have access to quality sexuality education are at greater risk of exposure to pornography in social media. I also strongly support the recommendations of the report to provide in national legislation a clear definition of violent pornography, which includes content depicting rape, humiliation, life-threatening acts, and all other forms of sexual violence. It is also very important to introduce effective sanctions against online platforms and internet service providers who allow the dissemination of illegal and violent pornographic materials and persistently fail to comply with obligations of removal of pornography from the platforms. And the last word, I would like to thank and congratulate Laura CASTEL for her report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the next speaker is Mr. Stamatis. You have the floor.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, after the smuggling for the migrants, refugees, after the human trafficking, the new theme that we have is the violent pornography. And I would like to congratulate Laura, not only about her commitment and path for this report, because this report is one step, two steps, maybe 3 steps forward from today for tomorrow. We have not only to protect the women, we have to protect our society. Behind of the violent pornography, there are men and dirty minds and huge of money. So we have to destroy this industry. What kind of platforms we have today? We know everybody about the dark internet and the website. So we have to protect our children, our girls, our women, and the humanity. And this report shows not only the commitment of the rapporteur, but the steps that each country can make and to protect the women on this. I have to say one thing to these women. Trust yourselves, not others. And we have to empower all these women, all these victims for violent pornography. And finally, I would like to say something in Spain. Laura, in Spanish, sorry. Quiero agradecer tu trabajo, tu cooperación y tu buen hacer en esta asamblea. Te deseo mucha suerte. Gracias.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Baroness Brown. You have the floor.
Thank you. The online world has grown, pornography has proliferated, and this report accurately describes violent pornography featuring women strangled, slapped, spat on, or worse. It's being normalised. These vile male power fantasies objectify women as submissive, constantly available, existing solely for the gratification of men. Exposure can alter what young men and women believe is acceptable in their own relationships, creating a culture of sexual violence and dangerous practices such as strangulation. There is a zero safe way to strangle someone. Even a small amount of pressure on the neck can harm the brain with devastating consequences. Yet many porn sites actively push this extreme consent, this extreme content, and they host outright illegal videos including child sexual abuse and rape. This year, the UK has made progress tackling pornography that depicts dangerous or illegal acts. We have criminalised the depictions of strangulation, incest and adults pretending to be under 16. Porn sites are required actively to detect and block such content with enforcement and fines for non-compliance. Yet there's so much more to do to ensure parity between offline and online pornography. What's illegal on the high street should be illegal online too. As this report rightly says, we must challenge harmful practices and expectations through comprehensive sex education, reaffirming consent as a prerequisite for every single sexual interaction. Let's affirm extreme pornography promotes coercion and violence, it promotes misogyny. We've got to recognise this threat to women and girls and work to restrict the poisonous content that the porn barons are able to peddle.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Baldursdottir. You have the floor.
Mr. President, I would like to begin by thanking the rapporteur, Laura CASTEL, for this extensive report. The rapporteur has examined the issue in depth and spoken to experts, victims, and lawyers from around the world. The fundamental question is whether violent pornography is part of free speech or whether it constitutes systemic violence against women and children that we have a duty to stop. Research shows that around 90% of young people have seen pornography. Today, access to such material is easy through smartphones and social media. Many young people are exposed to pornography for the first time between the ages of 11 and 13, often by accident. As a psychologist myself, I am well aware of the consequences that repeated exposure to pornography can have on young children and people. Pornography can give young people an unrealistic image of sex and relationships. Research also suggests that excessive exposure may affect how young people understand consent, relationships, and appropriate behavior. The report reminds us that violent pornography is not gender neutral. In the vast majority of cases, women and girls are the targets of the violence depicted. It is therefore crucial to intervene early through prevention and to strengthen sex education so that young people understand boundaries, consent, and what constitutes a healthy and respectful relationship. The law must be clear, and online platforms and social media companies must take greater responsibility for identifying and removing illegal content. Protecting children and women from violence is a public health issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the next speaker is Ms. Stevenson. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I really want to congratulate Laura and Joe for their work on this really, really excellent, important report. There are serious concerns about the increasing proliferation of violent and extreme pornographic content on online forums, and in particular how this normalises gender-based violence and dehumanises women and girls. There's a mass growing availability of this kind of content. It's really worrying when set within the context of rising sexual violence rates in Europe. In Ireland, 1 in 4 women have experienced some form of sexual violence as an adult with their partner. This is why the existence of violence and extreme pornography, which glamorises and encourages violence during sex, including depictions of sexual assault, coercion and non-consensual conduct, is so alarming. Of particular concern is how the dangerous practice of strangulation, often referred to as non-fatal strangulation, is becoming increasingly normalised and common among young people's sexual habits. A UK-based study found that nearly half of sexually active young people had experienced strangulation, and that more than half of those under 35 had. More than half of 35-year-olds had experienced strangulation during sex. Depictions of choking are now rife on mainstream porn sites, and experts have attributed the rise of this practice among young people to their increased exposure to this online content. A 2023 report found that the average age a child first accesses this content is 13 years old. Can you imagine the brain of a 13-year-old child seeing this really, really extreme content? It's incredibly alarming. So I fully endorse this report's specific call for comprehensive sex education for young people to counter the harmful material they are being exposed to online. And a key component of this education needs to be greater media literacy, as the report suggests, to help young people identify and reject violent pornography in all of its forms. This is so fundamental when we talk about gender-based violence, when we talk about the escalating figures of gender-based violence, despite the commitments that we have under the Istanbul Convention. Prevention is fundamental. We can do all of the protection stuff. We can have all of the great access to justice opportunities, which we still don't. But until we tackle the prevention piece, we are going to be on this uphill battle. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And now it's Ms. Hammer. Agnes, you have the floor.
President, liebe Kollegen und Kolleginnen, ich danke für diesen Bericht, weil er sehr differenziert. Und das ist wichtig bei diesem Thema, denn Pornografie an sich ist nicht schlecht, sondern das Problem ist die gewalttätige Pornografie. Gewaltpornografie ist ein großes Problem, und zwar deshalb, weil sie nicht nur für Menschen zugänglich ist, die damit umgehen können, die erwachsene, selbstbestimmte Entscheidungen treffen, sondern sie ist für alle zugänglich und insbesondere für Jugendliche. Und wenn wir uns zurückerinnern, wie wir im Alter, wo wir uns dafür interessiert haben, versucht haben, an Pornografie zu kommen, musste man heimlich irgendwelche riesengroßen VHS-Videokassetten in irgendwelche großen Videorekorder schieben und musste darauf aufpassen, dass man nicht von irgendwelchen Eltern oder anderen Erziehungsberechtigten dabei erwischt wird. Jetzt geht man mit dem Handy, deckt sich die Decke über den Kopf oder setzt sich ins Schulklo und alles ist zugänglich. Und die schlimmsten gewaltpornografischen Videos sind zugänglich einfach nicht im Darknet und nicht über irgendwelche versteckten Kanäle. Alles, was ich dafür machen muss, ist, dass ich auf den Knopf drücke, wo steht, ich bin über 18. Dann bin ich drinnen. Und dann eröffnet sich eine Welt von Gewalt und eine Welt von Rollenbildern und von Darstellungen, die einfach ein jugendliches Gehirn nicht verarbeiten kann und auch nicht verarbeiten können soll. Und deshalb ist es wichtig, dass wir hier regulieren. Wir können uns nicht darauf verlassen, dass Plattformen selber regulieren, denn Plattformen wollen, es ist schon gefallen, Plattformen wollen Geld verdienen. Was unsere Aufgabe ist, dass wir hier Regulierungen schaffen. Wir verbieten auch zu schnell fahren, weil es gefährlich ist. Wir verbieten auch Drogen, weil sie gefährlich sind. Und deshalb ist es auch zulässig, trotz der Meinungsfreiheit Gewaltpornografie zu verbieten, einfach weil sie gefährlich ist. Vielen Dank.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Madame Pilar Carrà. You have
Merci,
the floor.
Monsieur le Président, chers et chers collègues. La numérisation provoque une accélération folle de la consommation de pornographie. Facilitée par le smartphone, elle n'a jamais été aussi accessible, gratuite et violente. Cette violence n'est pas neutre. Elle vise massivement les femmes et les filles et les enfants. En les soumettant, en les transformant en objets, la pornographie violente déshumanise et banalise la violence de genre. Elle prépare le terrain à leur augmentation dans la vie réelle. Quel est l'impact sur nos jeunes qui découvrent la sexualité à travers ces images de domination? En tant que parlementaire, mais aussi en tant que mère de 3 garçons adolescents, cette question me préoccupe. Un jeune garçon qui tombe sur ces scènes va ressentir une excitation pensée par les algorithmes et croire que le monde adulte cautionne cette violence. Curieux, souvent inexpérimenté, en quête de modèles, le jeune homme va revenir sur ce site de pornographie violente en pensant que la sexualité, c'est ce qu'il voit, avec des répercussions qui peuvent être désastreuses sur l'image générale qu'il a des filles, sur sa future manière de les appréhender et sur son rapport à la violence. D'où l'importance d'instaurer un dialogue en milieu scolaire, de renforcer une éducation sexuelle adaptée à l'âge et qui rappelle que le consentement et l'accord mutuel sont indispensables avant tout acte sexuel dans le respect de l'autre. Chers collègues, je vous invite à soutenir ce rapport et sa résolution. Il est urgent de presser nos États de prendre des mesures pour restreindre l'accès à la pornographie violente. Je termine avec cette citation du Dr Garcia tirée de l'excellent rapport de notre collègue Laura CASTEL, qui indiquait « Pourquoi est-il nécessaire d'intégrer la violence infligée aux femmes et aux filles dans les vidéos à caractère sexuel? Pourquoi les garçons et les filles devraient-ils développer une vision de la sexualité fondée sur l'agressivité? Et pourquoi les adultes devraient-ils être convaincus qu'il s'agit d'une composante acceptable, agréable et presque nécessaire du sexe? Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker will be Mr. Verducci. Francesco, you have the floor.
Grazie Presidente. Cara Laura, c'è scritto nella tua relazione la pornografia violenta non è neutrale. E questo è il punto. Il punto sono i segni che lascia, i contraccolpi, gli elementi tossici, non solo per gli adolescenti, per tutta la nostra società. È un consumo che il più delle volte non è libero, ma è indotto e imposto dal mercato feroce delle piattaforme, degli algoritmi, per cui dobbiamo esigere regole assolutamente, laddove violenza, umiliazione, coercizione vengono rappresentate come se fossero forme ordinarie di sessualità, questo produce un effetto distorsivo, profondo, che annienta proprio quella cultura del consenso, del rispetto, che deve essere la base di ogni relazione umana. Per questo io voglio dire, il contrasto alla pornografia non lo possiamo intendere in senso reazionario o oscurantista, guai se qualcuno lo utilizzasse come grimaldello per fermare l'educazione sessuale e affettiva nelle scuole. È proprio l'educazione alle relazioni, ai sentimenti, a una sessualità inclusiva, il modo più forte che abbiamo di contrastare modelli di pornografia violenta, di saper distinguere sempre che cos'è consenso e che cos'è invece sopraffazione. È un tema molto serio, culturale, sociale, di substrato, di sostanza anche delle relazioni quotidiane. È un tema talmente serio che determina ciò che siamo e anche l'idea di società che vogliamo, perché, e noi lo sappiamo assolutamente, una democrazia paritaria e un mondo più giusto si costruiscono solo a partire da relazioni affettive paritarie e giuste. Grazie Laura per questo lavoro e per quello che continuerai a fare. Grazie.
Thank you very much. That concludes the list of speakers, and I now call on Ms. Castel. You have 3 minutes to reply.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for the broadest support, for all your comments. Thanks also for the valuable discussions that we have done in the committee during all these 2 years and all these very good discussions. Thanks also to the priceless cooperation with the Venice Commission. And also thank you to the visit of in the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom legislation and policies was and has been a source of inspiration. Dear colleagues, during these 2 years drafting this report, we understood several facts that we all agreed on. Violent pornography constitutes a significant human rights problem. The violence depicted primarily affects women and girls. And there is a growing concern among international organizations about its potential effects on gender equality, public health, sexual violence, and child development. And finally, violent pornography should not be considered solely a matter of freedom of expression or entertainment, but also a challenge to human rights. Because violent pornography is not a harmless fiction. It is a systemic threat to gender equality, child protection, and public health. We must act, therefore, through a coordinated response to protect human rights for all. I would like to conclude by thanking the Secretary of the Quality Committee, Giorgio Lodo, and the Secretary General of my political group, Anna Kolotova, for the unconditional help and support in the preparation of this report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And does the chairperson want to speak? And it's okay to be moved.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Avant tout, je vais dire combien j'ai aimé travailler aussi avec toi pendant ces années. Voilà. Nous assistons en matière de pornographie à une escalade avec des pratiques toujours plus violentes pour répondre à une demande et capter l'attention. Or, la pornographie, si elle est l'expression d'une sexualité libre, elle ne doit pas être une industrie de déshumanisation. Dans de nombreuses vidéos, on ne parle plus seulement de sexualité filmée. On observe des scènes de violence, d'humiliation, le plus souvent assimilables à des actes de torture. Cela pose une question centrale, celle du consentement. Peut-on réellement parler de consentement libre et éclairé lorsqu'il existe des pressions économiques, psychologiques ou des manipulations ? En droit, le consentement vicié n'est pas un consentement. Il faut ici distinguer deux réalités. D'un côté, la pornographie comme fiction scénarisée. De l'autre, la pornocriminalité, désignant des situations ou des vidéos qui servent de support à de véritables violences. Viol, porn revenge, maltraitance ou humiliation. Ce ne sont pas mes propos, mais ceux de femmes anciennes actrices ou victimes de cette industrie qui témoignent. Ce n'est plus du cinéma, c'est du réel. Au vu de son évolution, la pornographie, surtout sans éducation en parallèle, contribue aux violences faites aux femmes. Eros doit-il coexister avec Thanatos? Je ne crois pas. Sylvie Pierre Brossolette a raison lorsqu'elle affirme que ces plateformes seraient la fabrique de futurs violeurs. Mais les psychologues mettent en garde, estimant que ces contenus permettent l'érotisation et la fantasmatisation de la domination, de l'humiliation et de la violence sexuelle. Ils banalisent la brutalité, l'inceste, voire la pédocriminalité. Par ailleurs, l'accès massif des mineurs à ces plateformes, malgré les débats européens sur la vérification d'âge, pose problème. Les dispositifs actuels, facilement contournables via des VPN ou le piratage des comptes, restent insuffisants. Certains témoignages évoquent même le vol de vidéos sur des plateformes censurées afin de les republier illégalement sur d'autres sites dans le but de contourner les mécanismes de contrôle mis en place. Ce sujet n'est donc pas une question morale, c'est une question de société et désormais une question de politique pénale. La Commission remercie Madame la rapporteure pour son travail qui souligne que si la liberté d'expression demeure un principe fondamental lorsqu'elle repose sur des contenus consensuels, non violents et respectueux de la dignité, sa restriction devient légitime, proportionnée et nécessaire dès lors que les contenus violents, coercitifs ou dégradants sont violents, coercitifs ou dégradants afin de garantir la sécurité et la dignité. Encore merci Laura pour ce rapport et merci d'avoir tellement travaillé en commission. Thank you.
The Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination has presented a draft resolution to which 25 amendments and 3 sub-amendments have been tabled. The committee has also presented a draft recommendation to which 5 amendments have been tabled, and we will start by taking the amendments to the draft resolution. They will be taken in the order which they appear in the compendium, and I remind you speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 1, 2, 17, 3, 4, 5, 26, 22, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 12, which were unanimously approved by the committee, be declared as definitively approved. Is that so? That is so. So if no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be approved. Is there any objection? There's no objection. So amendments 1, 2, 17, 3, 4, 5, 26, 22, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 to the draft resolution are therefore approved and will not be called. I understand that the chairperson of the committee also wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 16, 18, 19, 23, 24, 25, and 27 to the draft resolution, which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared as definitively rejected. I understand that amendments 15 and 21 were also rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority. However, because amendments 15 and 21 are subject to sub-amendments, they will be taken separately. I understand that Amendment 26 was also rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority. However, because Amendment 26 is subject to an oral amendment, it will be taken separately. Is that so, Ms. Fresco-Olfo? It is so. Thank you. So if no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be rejected. Yes.
Herr Vizepräsident, geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, mit dieser Änderung 16, machen Sie eigentlich den ganzen Bericht kaputt. Es geht um wirklich Porno, sprich Gewaltpornografie.
Sorry, sir. We just need to see if there's 10 members that object to the amendment. There has to be 10 members objecting. You cannot have a speech now. Okay, thank you. There are no objections, so I call that amendment 16, 18, 19, 23, 24, 25, and 27 to the draft resolutions are therefore rejected and will not be called. Thank you. Then there is a sub-amendment proposed to Amendment 15, and I first call Mr. Ronan Mullen to support Amendment 15. You have 30 seconds. Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank the rapporteur again for proposing this sub-amendment. I think this just sets the context that against the background of violent pornography, there is often a hidden violence and a lack of freedom, a coercion, situations of economic and social disadvantage. even where pornography is not ostensibly violent or extreme, that, as the sub-amendment proposes, it may benefit from situations where participants are actually very much disadvantaged and oppressed. Thank you.
Thank you, and I call on Ms. Laura CASTEL to support the sub-amendment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my proposal is to substitute the word almost, because he proposes almost invariably proceed and benefit by may proceed and benefit. So change almost by the word may.
Does anyone want to speak against the sub-amendment? That's not the case. What is the opinion of Mr. Mullen?
Sorry. I would obviously have preferred it not to have been changed at all, but I'm happy with the compromise and I accept the sub-amendment.
Okay, and the committee is obviously in favour of the sub-amendment, so I will now put it to the vote. The vote is open.
So the next page will be 62.
62. Can we close? Yes, and I close the vote, call for the results. And the amendment is adopted. Thank you. And now we come to the main amendment 15, and does anyone want to speak against the amendment 15? It's not the case. What is the opinion of the committee? And the committee is in favour. I now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the results, and the amendment is adopted. And now we turn on to sub-amendments proposed to Amendment 21. I call Mr. Roland Mullen to support Amendment 21, and you have 30 seconds, Mr. Mullen.
Thank you very much. This has to do with research, if I recall correctly, and this has to do with requiring online platforms hosting pornographic and sexually explicit content to prevent private individuals. I think that from uploading such content. So I think that's changed to uploading violent content. And again, I'm happy to accept that compromise. The important point is that private individuals would not be enabled to upload content where these websites and platforms are operating, because this is a very unaccountable behaviour, and that exposes much greater levels of risk of very harmful content.
Thank you. I'll ask Ms. Laura CASTEL to support sub-amendment 1.
My proposal is, instead of after paragraph 16.2, put in paragraph 16.2.2, which is one part of the proposal, and then substitute the word such, in uploading such content. Instead of this, propose the word in uploading violent content. This is the proposal of the sub-amendment.
So she has spoken about both her sub-amendments.
Yeah. Thank you. And with this, I think, as I heard it, you have talked now about both sub-amendments. But I also heard, Mr. Mullen, that you supported the sub-amendment 1. Is that true? Yes, you are nodding. So, and the committee is obviously in favour, and I now put sub-amendment 1 to the vote. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the results, and the sub-amendment is adopted. I now call on Mr. No, you have actually also spoken about sub-amendment 2, Ms. Castel. So does anyone want to speak against this sub-amendment? And what is here the opinion of Mr. Mullen? You are in favor. Thank you. And the committee is obviously in favor. And I'll now put the sub-amendment number 2 to the vote. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the result, and the sub-amendment is adopted. And now we go to the main amendment 21 as amended. Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? That's not the case. What is the opinion of the committee? The committee is in favor, so I now put it to the vote. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the results, and the amendment as amended is adopted.
Page 74.
And then we move on to amendment 26, and here I understand, Mr. Mullen, that you wishes to withdraw amendment 26 in favor of a compromise amendment. Is that so? That is so. And then I have received this oral amendment from Ms. Laura CASTEL, who is the rapporteur, which reads as follows. In paragraph 16.3.7, replace the words violent pornography with the words violent and non-violent pornography. And in my opinion, this oral amendment meets the criteria. Is there any opposition to the amendment being debated? That's not the case, so therefore I call Ms. Castel to support the oral amendment. You have 30 seconds.
It's because it's about research, and research about the effects of the social and psychological effects. So it is okay support research on these effects on the normal, I would say, pornography. So not delete violent, the word violent, instead try to research violent pornography and pornography research effects. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to speak against this oral amendment? That's not the case, and the committee is obviously in favor, and I now put the oral amendment to the vote. The vote is open.
So the next page after this will be 80.
Okay. And the vote is closed. I call for the result, and the amendment is adopted. We'll now proceed to vote on the draft resolution, and here a simple majority is required. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the results, and the resolution as amended is adopted. And now we move to the We'll move to the draft recommendation and take the 5 amendments which have been put forward. And I remind you again that speeches are on 30 seconds. I understand that the chairperson of the Committee of Equality and Non-Discrimination wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 28, 29 and 30 to the draft recommendation, which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared definitively rejected. Is that so, Ms. Fresco-Rolfo? It is so. And if no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be approved. Is there any objection?
Sorry, to be rejected.
To be rejected, of course. Is there any objection to them being rejected? That's not the case, so amendments 28, 29 and 30 to the draft recommendation are therefore approved and rejected and will not be called. And we will then move to amendment number 13. And I call Mr. Joseph O'Reilly, Rapporteur for Opinion, to support amendment 13. And you have 30 seconds, Mr. O'Reilly. You move this amendment. Does anybody want to speak against? What is the opinion of the committee? You were in favor with the large majority. I'll now put it to the vote. The vote is opened. Amendment number 13. And the vote is closed. I call for the result. And the amendment is adopted. And I go to amendment number 14. I call again Mr. O'Reilly to support this amendment 14.
Thank you. Just to say, I want to underline the crucial role and responsibility of technology companies in ensuring that children are effectively protected, in particular through safety for design devices and tools. So in other words, that there are sufficient protections technologically.
Thank you. Does anybody want to speak against? That's not the case. What is your opinion of the committee?
En faveur à une très large majorité.
The committee is in favor with a large majority. I now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the results, and the amendment is agreed to. Then we come to the draft recommendation contained in document 16.422 as amended, and I remind you that a 2/3 majority is required. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the results. And the recommendation is adopted. Thank you very much. And congratulations. And the Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow morning at 10:15 with the agenda approved on Monday morning. The sitting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone. Sleep tight.